Did you know that long before he was an award-winning actor, race car enthusiast, and philanthropist, Paul Newman was a just shy of 18 years old enlistee in the Navy? Hello, and welcome to Moments in History. I'm Linda Shenton-Matchett, author, speaker, and history geek. While researching my books, I unearth tons of intriguing historical information that doesn't end up in my books. So I've created this channel to share those tidbits with you. Born in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland, Paul Leonard Newman and his older brother Arthur were raised in nearby Shaker Heights, a community founded by the Shakers in 1822 that saw exponential growth during the Great Depression. Paul's father owned and operated a sporting goods store. In January 1943, 4 days prior to his 18th birthday, Paul enlisted in the U.S. Navy with the goal of becoming a pilot. He then applied for officer training school before heading to Ohio University to await his acceptance. Six months later, he was sent to Yale University to attend the Navy V-12 program, a training program initiated during World War II to supply the Navy and Marines with a large number of college-educated officers. Begun in 1943 in July, the program sent more than 125,000 men through 131 colleges and universities in an accelerated course of study. Unfortunately for young Paul, his physical revealed color blindness that was later refuted, and he was eliminated from the program. He commented during a 2003 interview that he also couldn't do the quote-unquote science needed to fly, end quote. His next stop was basic training at the Naval Air Technical Training Center in Jacksonville, Florida, where he qualified as a rear seat radioman and gunner for torpedo bombers. Rear seat radiomen were responsible for enciphering and deciphering messages and were critical for communication between aircraft and ground or sea-based communications. This position manned the rear cockpits of carrier dive bombers and torpedo planes, alternately handling the radio gear and a .30 caliber machine gun. All radiomen gunners of that era were enlisted men. A gunner for torpedo bombers served as a defensive and often multifunctional crew member, using defensive machine guns to ward off enemy fighters and also performing other roles like radio operation or bombarding. Torpedo bombers, a military aircraft designed primarily to attack ships with aerial torpedoes, came into existence just before the First World War, almost as soon as aircraft were built that were capable of carrying the weight of a torpedo. The TBF/TBM Avenger, on which Paul served, had a dedicated turret gunner and a ventral or belly gunner, who also handled the radio and bomb sights. After spending several months at Naval Station Miami, Paul was then sent to Barbers Point in Hawaii in January of 1944, where he trained as a replacement pilot for torpedo bomber squadrons and served in 3 Pacific-based replacement torpedo squadrons, the V-98, the VT-99, and the VT-100. While he was with the VT-99, training personnel in TBM-1CS, TBM-3S, and TBF-1CS, the squadron moved to Eniwak, then Guam, and in January of 1945 on to Saipan in preparation for the invasion of the Japanese home islands. Taking place from April 1st through June 22nd, 1945, the Battle of Okinawa eventually led to the Allied victory and was at a critical moment in the Pacific theater of World War II. From Okinawa, U.S. forces could increase airstrikes against Japan and blockade important logistical routes. However, the battle lasted nearly 3 months and included some of the worst kamikaze attacks of the entire war. Over 1,300 ships were involved with more than 103,000 soldiers 88,000 Marines, and 18,000 Navy personnel participating in the battle. At some point during the battle, Paul and several other air crews from his squadron were ordered to be replacements on board the Essex-class aircraft carrier Bunker Hill with their TBM Avenger aircraft. Fortunately for Paul, his pilot suffered from an ear infection which grounded the aircraft and crew until he could recover. So they did not report to that ship. On May 11th, 2 Japanese kamikaze aircraft hit the ship, and in the resulting fires and explosions, 346 sailors lost their lives, among them the entire contingent from Newman's squadron. Because of the fierce resistance at Okinawa, American military planners estimated that conquering Japan would result in 1 million plus casualties for the United States. Some projections estimated Japanese losses to exceed 20 million. The U.S. numbers might have been conservative. The Allies didn't know at the time, but the Japanese had correctly guessed where the landings would take place and had moved over 900,000 men there. President Harry Truman worried that the invasion, the largest amphibious assault ever planned, would result in too many deaths. The decision was then made to use the atomic bomb and hope Japan would surrender. In his book, The Making of the Atom Bomb, author Richard Rhodes references a conversation with Paul, a close friend. Quote, "I remember him telling me that he had been over there, and specifically that he was training for the invasion of Japan. I was talking about the deep complexity of using the bomb, how people had such mixed feelings. That's when he said, 'You know, Dick, I'm one of those guys who said thank God for the atomic bomb.' Why? Because Paul was convinced he would not live through the battle. He was training for an invasion that was going to be horrible and bloody, and he would be lucky if he got out of it with his life." In August 1945, Paul was part of the VT-99 contingent aboard the aircraft carrier Hollandia, which was operating about 500 miles off Japan when Enola Gay dropped its atomic bomb on Hiroshima. After the Japanese surrender, Paul served with Carrier Aircraft Service Unit 7 in Seattle, before being honorably discharged on January 21, 1946. Paul Newman was decorated with the Good Conduct Medal, the American Area Campaign Medal, the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, and the World War II Victory Medal, as well as his aviation wings. Using the GI Bill after the war, he earned his bachelor degree in drama from Kenyon College in Ohio before going on to study at the Actors Studio in New York City. Paul's first role on Broadway occurred in 1953, and he landed some television roles as well. He eventually moved to Hollywood and obtained a screen test for the role of James Dean's brother in East of Eden. He didn't get the role, but the connection to Dean garnered attention, and Paul replaced him in a TV broadcast of Our Town, then again replaced Dean after the actor's death in The Boxer, an adaptation of a Hemingway story. Twice more, the Dean connection paid off when Paul was cast in 2 roles originally earmarked for Dean: Billy the Kid in The Left-Handed Gun and Rocky Graziano in Somebody Up There Likes Me. His performance in that film led to a starring role in The Rack, a war drama about the Korean War. In a 2011 interview, screenwriter Stuart Stern recounted that Newman drew on an incident from his Navy years in which his best friend was sliced to pieces on an aircraft carrier by a plane's propeller as an emotional trigger to express the character's trauma when acting in that film. As with all those who served and continue to serve in the military, Paul changed from the young man who enlisted at the tender age of 17 years and 11 months. Are you intrigued by these and other World War II topics? Consider picking up my book, The American World War II Homefront in 29 Objects, in which artifacts collected from across the nation tell the stories of the American people whose lives were shaped by the second war-to-end-all wars, World War II. Purchase details can be found in the description. Thank you for watching and have a great day.